Hi, Nicole, can you hear me? Hi, Paul, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Good. Can you say something back and make sure I can hear you?
You hear me now?
Okay.
You're running the show over there? Okay, great.
Be a friend.
We'll wait a few more minutes.
Robbie Watkins is here, everybody. He'll be starting in a minute. Robbie's in the house. How are you, Don? Good?
I'm good, Karen. How are you? I had a nice lunch with David the other day.
That's what he said. That's great.
Yeah, it was really nice.
This is like the whole Gampa hearing us talk, so I'll stop now.
It's okay. Hello, everyone.
Okay, we got everybody hooked up? Okay, so we have our people on Zoom and we have people on YouTube all tied in. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second of five classes in the Buddhism, the Discovering Buddhism module, Samsara and Nirvana. So do you have anyone who's here tonight who wasn't here last week? Okay, that's fine. I don't think you'll have any problems catching up with us. Just wanted to remind people that next week we'll be here Monday night, and then we're having basically a Dharma festival at Kadampa Center. On Wednesday, we have the great honor to host His Holiness Ling Rinpoche, who is really the small group of lamas who's right below His Holiness the Dalai Lama in terms of importance and respect that they have in the Tibetan tradition. And he just managed to work us in his schedule for one day. Unfortunately, it's in the middle of the week during the daytime, but if there's any way you can participate in that, it's highly recommended. He'll be teaching Wednesday morning, and then Wednesday afternoon, he'll be giving a Medicine Buddha initiation, which is a healing meditation practice. And even if you don't want to take the full initiation, you're more than welcome to come and just get the blessing and being part of it and being in the presence of really one of the great lamas. And then it wasn't planned this way, but just happened this way. Then Friday evening, Venerable Khyentse Rinpoche, another one of the great Tibetan teachers, the root guru of Geshe Geluk, our teacher, will be in town, and he's been here several times before. He's a wonderful teacher and just a very joyful presence to be around. And he'll be at the center Friday evening, Saturday morning, and Sunday morning. And then possibly Wednesday the following week, though that's up in the air. So again, if you can attend any of that, it's highly recommended. These are Khyentse Rinpoche is of the generation of Tibetan lamas who was born and studied in Tibet before they walked over the Himalaya mountains, and there are very few of those left. They're few and far between, and that they show up here in Raleigh, North Carolina with us having to travel halfway around the world is really quite amazing. I mean, Karen, you've spent some time with Khyentse Rinpoche. Anything you want to say or add?
No, I really don't. He's an amazing being, and just being in his presence, if any of you have been, it's something special. So I definitely encourage it.
Okay, thank you. So we'll begin with our prayers in the Gold Prayer Book on page 34 and 35, and then we'll do our first meditation session of the evening. We'll start with taking refuge and generating bodhicitta 3 times in English, and then we'll read the 4 immeasurables in English, and we'll pause after each one of those for a minute and just think about the meaning of it. Okay, so start with generating refuge and bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So we will do our first meditation session, and this is, there's several types of meditation that we practice. This is what's called concentration meditation, where we focus our mind on a chosen object, in this case, the movement of the breath in and out through the nostrils. If you've been coming on Sunday mornings for the last couple of weeks, Geshe Gelik has been giving some very interesting teachings on concentration meditation and has touched on a lot of things that I had never particularly heard of, obviously teachings that he has received. But he says when we're concentrating on an object, when we're really making an effort to concentrate, there is a sort of, he used the word energy, but he wasn't quite sure that was the right translation, an energy that draws our mind towards the object. So in this case, if we're concentrating on the breath, it's as if the mind was being drawn to the breath. And he says the stronger our concentration becomes, the stronger that attraction to the chosen object is. So I thought it was very interesting. He says that in and of itself, just that concentration on the object is a pleasurable experience, gives us a feeling of calm and quietness that is in and of itself is quite pleasurable. So that's an interesting way to look at these meditations when we do them. Anyway, let's start our meditation by checking our posture. Whether we're sitting on a chair or on a cushion, we keep our back a little bit straighter than we normally sit, not rigid, but a little bit stretched out and a little bit more erect. Our head may be just a couple degrees in front of the vertical, but not tilted to one side or the other. Our eyes either just very lightly closed or slightly open so that just a little bit of light comes in without the appearance of actual objects. Our lips are lightly closed, our jaw is relaxed, our tongue is on the hard palate behind our upper teeth. Our shoulders are down and slightly back so that our chest is open, and this is said to open the energy channels in front of our spine that the winds travel on. The consciousness is said to ride on these winds, but we won't really get into that in this meditation. Our upper arms are away from the sides of our chest. Our right hand is on our left with our thumbs touching. If we're sitting in a chair, our feet are flat on the floor or on a cushion if we find that helpful. If we're sitting on a cushion, we're towards the front third of the cushion, not back, but towards the front, so our pelvis opens up a little bit and our legs are in a comfortable, solid position. So take a minute, scan your body, identify any sources of tension or discomfort, and address them now, wiggle them out if you need to, so that once the posture is established, it becomes pretty much self-maintaining and not something we need to worry about during the rest of the meditation. And we begin by our meditation by taking 3 deep breaths from the abdomen. The abdomen expands on the in-breath and then contracts towards the spine on the out-breath. So just do that 3 times slowly. And now we allow our breathing to return to its normal pattern. And as we did in the prayers we said together, we'll take a moment and establish our motivation for being here tonight. And we think that everything we do together tonight is done so that I can develop my mind, so that I can be of benefit to all sentient beings. Seems a little ridiculous almost to think that way, but that said, that's the most powerful and meaningful motivation we can bring to everything we do, from when we first get up in the morning to when we lie down at night. So let's generate that bodhicitta motivation that Lama Zopa Rinpoche said we should bring to every aspect of our practice, to our meditation, our contemplation, and our study, all done with bodhicitta. And having set our motivation, we now begin the actual meditation, a concentration meditation. The object is the physical sensation of the breath moving out through our nostrils, moving in and out. Just the tactile sensation of the movement of the air. And we just place our concentration on that. As Geshe Gelik says, there's an energy that draws our mind to that object. It may not be very strong. We could think of it almost as a little bit of magnetic pull. Mind to breath. And since most of us aren't great at concentration, it's a skill we have to practice and develop, our mind will wander off because the pull isn't that strong. So when we do wander off, we just set aside whatever has drawn us away with its own magnetic pull, and we come back to the breath over and over again. And we can end our meditation with a brief dedication. We can acknowledge that we've created a positive imprint on our mind stream just by sitting quietly for a few minutes. And we think, may that positive imprint not be lost or dissipated, but may it ripen and grow in a way that ultimately benefits all sentient beings. You can relax your concentration. Okay. Any questions or comments about the meditation? Okay, just a little bit of, yeah.
Robbie, could I get you to angle your mic down a little bit? At the moment, when you're breathing out through your
Am I
nose,
breathing?
it's
Okay.
straight on the microphone.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's no way for you to know, so one of us has to tell you.
Yeah. Okay, is that better? How's that sound? Are you picking up my voice now without my breathing?
Yeah, got your voice perfectly.
Let's have a go. Okay. A little bit of review on the subject of this course. Samsara. Who can tell me what samsara is? Anybody remember the definition? Cyclic existence, what does that mean? Yeah, it's the cycle of being born, dying, being reborn, and as Chris says, the important factor is about it's uncontrolled. It's forced on us, okay? We have no control. It's being stuck in this cycle, okay? And this is what's depicted in the Wheel of Life, the 12 links of dependent origination, which we'll really get into next week, and that'll take 2 weeks to discuss. But samsara is this cycle, this forced, uncontrolled cycle of rebirth that we seem to be stuck in now. And this is based on an assumption that our consciousness continues after our physical death and assumes another form after that. Okay, so samsara, nirvana. What does nirvana mean? Yeah, okay, that's freedom from samsara, escaping from samsara, getting out of this cycle. What's the actual meaning of the word? Anybody remember? It means extinction, okay? And what we're referring to here is the extinction of suffering. Now, sometimes you hear people describe nirvana as entering a state of non-being. Now, that may be what is taught in some other Buddhist traditions, I don't know. But definitely, it is in our tradition, in the Mahayana tradition, it is not the end of being. It is not the end of existence, because consciousness continues without end. So our consciousness does not go out of existence. The consciousness is not what is extinguished. It's suffering, okay? And we're talking about not a diminution or things are a little bit better or I'm coping better. It means a complete end of all suffering in our mind stream, okay? And that's one of the very few things that, according to the Buddha, is permanent, okay? By permanent, he meant unchanging. Once you get to that state of nirvana, there's no return, okay? You are free of suffering till the end of till throughout the rest of your existence, which is without end. It is a permanent end to all suffering. So it sounds kind of unbelievable, but the Buddha says that's something each of us can achieve, okay? And someone who reaches nirvana extinguishes suffering from their mind stream. What are they called? an arhat, okay? So an arhat is free of samsara. An arhat can be reborn, take physical form again, but it's by choice. So an arhat can choose to be reborn as a human being or a grasshopper or in these other realms, supposedly, that the Buddha told us about. Okay, so someone who has completely eliminated suffering from their mind stream, which means seeing things as they are, basically, freeing yourself completely of delusions and projections, has completely developed the wisdom aspect of their mind. But in the Mahayana tradition, there's another stage we can go beyond that. And what's that? Enlightenment, yeah, or Buddhahood. And what's the difference between nirvana and enlightenment? Yeah, bodhicitta, compassion. An enlightened being, or a Buddha, so Buddhahood, is someone who has developed both the wisdom and the compassion aspects of their mind completely. Like I said last week, you got to be smart and you got to be nice to be a Buddha. You can't be one or the other, okay? So the Buddha is free of suffering, has completely developed his compassion aspect, which is, what's compassion in Buddhism? Bodhicitta is the wish to become a Buddha. How do we define compassion? It's the wish that others be free of suffering, okay? So the Buddha does not suffer, and he wishes that for others also. He's not an all-powerful God. He can't take away the suffering of others. He understands that everybody has to do it on their own eventually. And so the action of a Buddha is to teach, basically, to teach his own experience, to share that. Okay, how he developed his or her qualities of wisdom and compassion. So 3 terms, okay? And, it's possible you don't necessarily go straight here and straight there. You could go to the compassion aspect first, where you're a bodhisattva. That's someone who's developed their compassion aspect. And then they go to Buddhahood by developing the wisdom aspect. Most of us are working on both at the same time, the wisdom and the compassion wings, okay? So, but the bodhisattva has developed his qualities of bodhicitta. That's the compassionate aspect, okay? Any questions about that or comments? Just so we get clear on these terms, because they get thrown around fairly loosely at times, particularly nirvana. We really don't talk about that a lot, but it's important to know what it is, I think. Yeah, question? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of scientific research that's coming into this now with people doing PET scans on people who, when they meditate on compassion, and seeing what changes are actually going on in the mind. And I'm not
sorry.
an expert on that.
I'm sorry, can the comment or question be repeated?
Yeah, his comment just about some studies in California being done on non-dualistic thinking and so on. Yeah, we'll need to use the microphone for comments, so people back home, sorry about that. Okay, so we're not going to talk about nirvana tonight. We're not going to talk about enlightenment. We're going to be good, gloomy Buddhist, and we're going to talk about samsara and what why would we want to get out of samsara? I mean, why? Being born, getting sick, getting old, getting sick and dying over and over again throughout endless time. What's not appealing about that? And this is one of the first teachings of the Buddha, and you've probably had this in some of the other modules, but I wanted to touch on it and go through it tonight because it's important to set up the 12 links, the Wheel of Life, that we'll be talking about next week. So this is what when people hear this, they say, oh, Buddhism is so gloomy. It's so negative. It's so depressing. You know, just sitting there and thinking about how you're suffering. I mean, why in the world would I want to do that? This is the first noble truth of the Buddha, that life, existence in samsara, is suffering, okay? So how would people define suffering? What's the definition of suffering? Anybody want to take a stab at that? I don't have a good one. I didn't check to see what the official Buddhist definition of suffering is, but I have an idea. Something about not accepting. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Anybody else? Wanting, dissatisfaction. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean walking around crying, life is terrible, life is awful. I think Jan Willis in the video last week said, things aren't the way I want them to be. I want them to be this way, and they're not. And that's a problem, okay? So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about suffering. So from just the greatest losses and pain to just the minor irritations. So lots of times the Sanskrit word, I think it's Tibetan, it must be Tibetan. Tibetan word for this is dukkha. Sometimes it's not translated as suffering, sometimes it's translated as dissatisfaction. Okay, life or existence is not satisfactory. Geshe Gelik frequently refers to it as complications. Life is complicated. We don't like all these complications. You know, I want to do this, this, and this, but I've got to do that, that, and that. And this person is telling me X, Y, and Z, and this one's saying A, B, C. So life is complicated. It can be as simple as that. Okay? So the Buddha said, if we look at life honestly, he's saying, don't accept this because I said so, but look at your own life, we're going to find that life is not satisfactory. And he said there are three different types of dissatisfactoriness that we'll generally come into contact with when we are in samsara. And the first is referred to as I'm going to use suffering, the suffering of suffering. Okay, and this is what we generally think of as pain or problems. Okay, it can be physical pain. You know, we cut our finger when we're slicing onions. Okay, I don't think there are many of us who would say, oh, that's great. That feels good. I'm really glad this happened. I mean, this is, I spend a lot of time in the kitchen, and you sit there and you nick a finger and you're starting to bleeding, and the thought is, if it's not excruciatingly physically painful, is I wish I hadn't done that. I wish that hadn't happened, because that's going to get in the way of what I want to do. I want to get this cooked, but now I have to deal with a bleeding finger. I don't accept that. Even if it's not excruciating physical pain, it's an irritation. The mind is unsettled. The mind is not accepting reality. So that's a minor example. It can be severe illness, pain. It can be emotional pain, the loss of a relationship, a financial loss that we weren't expecting, not getting a promotion that we thought we were going to get, all sorts of things we ordinarily think of as pain, okay? Physical or emotional pain. Now, I think it's important to realize that when we talk about suffering, we're talking about a mental phenomena. This is our consciousness, our mind. Suffering is not the knife cutting into the flesh, okay? The suffering is the reaction of the mind to that physical experience. And it's said that, for example, if we reach nirvana, when we're completely free of suffering, we can be reborn as a human being by choice and have things such as the loss of a hand or an arm, the exact same physical sensation, but our mind does not suffer. So what we're talking about is a mental phenomena, okay? Doesn't mean we're changing what happens to us physically if we get rid of suffering. We're changing how our mind responds to that. We're getting rid of this mind that wants things to be other than they are, okay? So this is the first and most obvious type of suffering. And if we look at our own lives, we'll all find many examples of that, just on a daily basis, from the smallest little irritation, when we reach and our back says, ugh, to great emotional and physical pain, okay? Very obvious. And I think we all see that in our lives. The next type of suffering is a little more subtle, but not hard. This is the suffering of change. And this is really the Buddha talking about how our mind responds to experiences that are initially pleasurable or even blissful, in that if they're prolonged, they turn from, our mind changes from thinking of them as pleasurable to thinking of them as unpleasurable. And the example that's always given is, for example, if we're eating a great meal. Initially it's very pleasurable, but then if we continue to eat and eat the same food, it becomes less pleasurable to the point where it can actually become unpleasurable, painful if we continue to eat beyond a certain point. So there is nothing in the food itself that is inherently pleasurable. It's how our mind responds to that experience. And the Buddha said that any experience that is initially pleasurable will, if prolonged, change into unpleasant, okay? Or even, we can see it in other examples, a friendship may change over time from a pleasurable experience to one that's very unpleasant, okay? This is not the relationship, it is changing, but this is how our mind reacts to it. So even pleasurable experiences, because of our mind becoming attached to them, of overestimating what's in them, can become or will with time change to unpleasurable experiences, okay? Pleasure changes into pain over time. There is no experience that is inherently, always, forever pleasurable. Even the most pleasurable experiences are, at some level, unsatisfactory, okay? Don't give us the type of permanent, unchanging happiness that we all aspire to. And that's kind of a given, that we all want to be happy, and that's a completely valid wish, okay? It's not selfish or self-centered or anything like that. Wanting to be happy, His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says that we all want to be happy. We think we can get it from certain experiences, and we find that we can't. They become unsatisfactory. And that can be a very painful experience in a relationship or something. We go into it thinking, this is it, this is going to make me happy. And we find out over time, rather painfully, that it's not making me happy because I was attached to something that really didn't exist. I was hoping for something from that experience that it's impossible for it to do, which is to make me permanently happy. Okay? Suffering of change, a little bit more subtle, but I think that's something we can meditate on and really start to see in our experience. Okay? The third type of suffering that the Buddha described is what's called the suffering of pervasiveness. And I've seen a lot of different definitions of this. This kind of means we're screwed. As long as we've got a body like this and a mind like this, which are the product of uncontrolled karma, we're going to suffer, okay? We're just designed to have unsatisfactory experiences, okay? But just by being born in samsara, too bad, okay? You're going to suffer. Even if you realize this, and even if you realize this, you're still going to suffer, okay? If you're under the control of karma, of negative karma, that gives us a body and mind. It's like, if you think about biochemistry, it's taught we have receptors in our body, receptors for serotonin, receptors for dopamine, receptors for this, where the dopamine fits exactly into that receptor in the brain. We're receptors for suffering. That's what we are. That's what fits into the mind and body that we have, okay? Because of karma, okay? We don't have a choice. And it's really this that causes us to continue to create karma and experience these other types of suffering. Okay. Now the Buddha says it's important to realize, but don't get bummed out, because he says, second noble truth, there is an end to suffering, okay? And that's nirvana, okay? We can completely eliminate all three types of suffering from our mind stream permanently, forever, okay? They can be eliminated, but we first have to realize what's going on. We have to be realistic, because the main cause of our suffering, of being reborn over and over again in samsara, is not seeing reality, which is referred to as ignorance. When we talk about ignorance, that's what we're talking about, not seeing things the way they are. That causes us to act out of negative mind streams, anger, attachment, greed, impatience, create negative karma, which will cause us to suffer in the future. And that's what we'll talk about in the 12 links when we get to that next week. Okay, questions, comments? Or people just want to go and slit their wrist? Karen.
Thanks, Robbie. A question came up on Zoom. Arhats have wisdom, no ignorance. Would that not include compassion?
Let's see. Arhats have wisdom. Well, this, typically you don't develop one without some degree of the other. So I think, it's hard to, I think technically you could say there could be an arhat without compassion, but it's hard to imagine that, because the characteristic of wisdom is that you don't harm others. Okay, that's the main teaching of the main thing you learn on the wisdom side, is that you don't harm others because it causes suffering for yourself and them. So that's a good question. I'm going to have to think about that some more, yeah. But I understand the question. I'm not sure of what the party line answer would be on that one, yeah. Anybody have any thoughts? Any arhats in the room want to answer that? I mean, that's the way I'm presenting is definitely a little schematic, so you have to hold it pretty close to your mouth, yeah.
I was just thinking about some of the Zen traditions. It's about you achieving it on your own, and there's not a lot of talk about bringing others into it. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, actually, Zen is a Mahayana tradition.
Is it?
Yeah, even though I think they tend not to talk about that, but
Right.
the Zen is considered a Mahayana tradition where you aim for enlightenment, which requires the compassion aspect also. Yeah, I'll just say this is a little bit schematic, so I think in reality, the two are not as separate as I have presented them here, but good question, yeah. Any other comment? Yeah.
So for me, I tend to, looking at suffering of change, I tend to gravitate toward familiarity. So I don't like to get uncomfortable by going into change because I know the results, or I may know some of the results of staying in unchanging moments. So by moving into change, so I kind of view it as somewhat of a path to eliminate suffering by staying in familiarity. And I don't know.
Have you found anything that doesn't change yet? That you,
No.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I think you're just giving the reverse side of the coin, yeah. We like things to stay the same and they ain't going to, yeah. That's really part of the suffering of change, yeah.
And then that's leads back to the accepting aspect.
Yeah, yeah, we have to, not accepting that everything changes and everybody changes, starting with our own body, and then everyone we're in a relationship with, we would like them to stay the way they are, but they ain't going to, yeah. Everything's always changing, yeah. Any other comments? Yes, Karen. Okay.
Okay. If there is diminishing returns on pleasurable experiences, how do you escape suffering through enlightenment? Is enlightenment apathy or bliss?
Yeah, that's a good question, yeah. And we'll talk about this next week. It's not apathy, okay? It's not turning into a bowl of oatmeal and not caring about anything, okay? But it's seeing things as they are. Seeing things as they are is not being apathetic. It's actually a quite active state of mind. So if you feel like you're falling into, I don't care about anything, it doesn't matter, we refer to that as nihilism, and that's going too far to one extreme. Okay, and we tend to go back and forth between the two. But the goal is definitely not to become apathetic or not caring, but it's to see things as they are. It's actually said that if we see how things are changing and are not attached to them, not projecting onto them qualities that they don't have, that we can actually have more pleasurable experiences, even if we haven't reached nirvana. It's these expectations that we're projecting onto. This vacation is going to make me happy, okay? And it doesn't, okay? If we don't have that expectation, we can actually enjoy the vacation more, yeah? So good question. Let's see, I think Martin's got a question on there. Yeah, okay.
Not a question so much as a comment or a thought. I've done a lot of self-help, self-improvement over the last few years. And one of the things that was brought up was the comfort zone and how the comfort zone can cause so many problems for people. And it basically boils down to we get so used to things being one way that we don't want them to change. And so we get caught in our comfort zone, even though we know our comfort zone is killing us. Like the person who smokes a pack of cigarettes a day, or the people who go to McDonald's and eat handfuls of the chips there, even though one large pack of McDonald's chips is the same as smoking a cigarette or a pack of cigarettes, if I remember correctly. But we still do it because it's comfortable. And I think this actually ties in probably more with the suffering of change, in the fact that if we really want to improve, if we really want to get out of things, we have to change. But that we have to get out of our comfort zone, and that's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's what we were talking about earlier. Okay.
Yes.
Let's do one last, thank you. Let's do one last meditation before we wind things up here this evening. Okay. So, check your posture. Three deep breaths from the abdomen. Set your motivation. And begin with placing the concentration on the breath. And now we're going to do a brief, what we call a review meditation, in which we will just mentally review the points that we've touched on this evening, so that they become the object of concentration. In the same way that our mind was drawn to the physical sensation of the breath moving out, we're going to place our mind on, feel it being drawn to the topics that we've touched on, so that our concentration stays on those. So it may just seem like thinking, and it is in a way, but it's in a concentrated, focused manner. So the first object of review is suffering of suffering. Just concentrate on that. What does that mean? How does it show up in my life? How did I experience it today? The mind is drawn to that topic and stays on it. And next, the suffering of change. What does that mean? How have I experienced it? How have experiences changed into dissatisfaction, into complications? And lastly, the suffering of pervasiveness. Not as obvious, but what does that mean? How has that shown up in my life? That's a little bit harder to appreciate, but see if you can just concentrate on that and begin to understand what we're talking about there. And we can do a brief dedication. We think that we've come together this evening for a subject that isn't necessarily pleasant or exciting, but it does help us understand the reality of our existence. And may that understanding ripen in our mind stream in a way that ultimately benefits all sentient beings. Okay, so I hope nobody's going to leave depressed this evening. Again, remember that the Buddha says there is an end to suffering, okay? So it's actually a very optimistic philosophy. So this coming week, continue with the readings. I'd like you to sit in meditation 6 days a week and just do an analytic meditation on the 3 types of suffering that the Buddha described. And you don't have to accept it. You know, you may say, I disagree, this is not my experience. But look at it and think about it and try and come to an understanding of what he's talking about. Then the next 2 weeks we'll be talking about the 12 links of dependent origination, and we'll be using the model of the wheel of life, which is hanging on the wall outside the Kadampa. But I'll bring a handout of that and we'll look through that because it's very complicated, and every time we talk about it, I have to study up on it myself because I forget what a lot of it means. So we'll work through that together over the next 2 weeks. And then the last week, we'll be talking about nirvana and some of its qualities. And do look at arranging your schedule so you can participate in some of our Dharma festival, if at all possible. Okay, well, thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thanks, everybody. Good
Thank you,
night.
Robbie. Thank you, Karen. Before we go, I'm just wondering, does anybody know what time we're meeting up to do the cleaning on Saturday?
I was wondering about that myself, but I've not heard. Kathy, do you know? Did you get this?
I think it's Sunday, isn't it?
That was that it's going to be both.
Oh,
So probably send that is my guess. Okay. I'd say Saturday also, but I don't know what time
Okay,
okay.
I'll keep looking.
I was going to try to
Yeah.
open the website, but I can't get it to come up right now, so.
Okay. Thank you. See you next week.
Good night.